bias like 99% of the other of investors and traders and stuff out there. I recognize that we're moved into a whole new paradigm, so the trend in precious metals is just continuing to be higher. So if you just recognize that and recognize there are going to be dips, there are going to be corrections just because they happen. People take profits and get skittish. But then you buy those dips. You recognize that, okay, given recent pattern, it's probably going to stop here, at a certain percentage point or at a certain point on the chart. And it does magically and then goes higher. When that happens, people tend to think you're maybe some kind of soothsayer or witch, which I'm not. So you'll see these big moves, and the moves are just going to get bigger. I compare it to when the Dow Jones Industrial started getting to 10,000, it would go down 200 points in a day, and you'd be, it's not that big of a deal. It's only 2%. But boy, back when it was at 3,000, if it went down 200 points in a day, it was a big deal. So you'll get, because the price is so high, percentage moves will exaggerate that fiat price. Given how the COMEX currently functions, do you think we might see something like that one day $20 moves? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes. And that day is coming. In silver, it appears to be coming pretty quickly.
What do you think the $20 moves would signal in the economy? I mean, like a $20 move is drastic. A $20 move for, I say, a $60 price in silver is 33%. So what type of effect do you think that would have? What type of society would it be in? Well,
why don't we address it this way? At this point, a $20 move would be almost that'd be a 40% move in a day. If silver is trading at $200 3 years from now, then it's only a 10% move in a day. So maybe we ought to call it a percentage move. If silver is moving 20% in a day, what is that telling us? It's likely telling us that the COMEX is broken, that the global delivery process of mining silver out of the ground and converting it into jewelry or coinage or whatever, that process is broken. And we need a new method of price discovery and a new method for, in simplest terms, buyers and sellers to meet. That day's coming. There's no question in my mind that the current state of affairs, the status quo, if you will, of the COMEX and the LBMA being the structures through which silver is purchased or hedged or delivered, that's going to end. It's inefficient, and it's too full now of fraud and deception. In the days past, where money was fiat paper and promises backed by the full faith and credit of a government, you could get away with the COMEX and the LBMA being this price discovery process. In the days to come, where I foresee some type of global or regional reserve currencies that are backed with tangible assets like gold or like energy, they're going to have to be more honest and open and trustworthy sources of price discovery, and the COMEX and the LBMA will probably, LBMA maybe not, but the COMEX will certainly go away in how they do things. So anyway, getting back to then what this means, when you start seeing 20% moves, that'll be a sign that it is rapidly coming to a close on the COMEX.
Thank you, Turd. Another question, another forecast from Cliff of the Webbots is that the gold and silver ratio not only will drop to historical norms, which is around 16 or 12 to 1, but for a brief period to hit parity, 1 to 1. Is this likely in your opinion? And if so, what type of effects would we see in the economy, financial markets, if they still exist, and food prices, etc., under that scenario? Would it be an orderly move as we're currently seeing to that 2-to-1, 1-to-1 ratio, or one or not?
No, that's a good question. I think any ratio is that has a history behind it. Where you're comparing one thing versus the other, or an index versus to it, then you'll see in that history a move where they get out of whack, sometimes to certain measures of how many different standard deviations, or however you want to measure it. Because that history of gold to silver is so long, I would really be surprised, unless the fundamentals really changed, that you would ever get gold and silver to permanently move to a ratio like that. I mean, it could go like, if whatever it is, 16-to-1, 12-to-1, whatever is our historic ratio we want to use, when it got to 100-to-1 or 80-to-1 10 years ago, that's however many standard deviations away from what is normal. And so you had to feel that was going to close. If it were to go to 2-to-1, again, it'd be almost the opposite direction, the same magnitude. And you'd say, well, okay, that's probably going to change. The only thing that would lead me to think that a move to a ratio like that would be permanent would maybe be some change in the fundamentals, where all of a sudden there was a cure of cancer that involved the industrial use of silver. You know what I mean? Something like that, to where the demand equation for silver was so dramatically altered that it would alter that ratio going forward. If we're just going to be using it for its silver, for its industrial use, but also primarily for its monetary use, then I would expect that ratio to still hold. So I could see it happening again. Who would have projected it would get to 100-to-1? But it is now coming back to more of this normal range. So if it were to get to 2-to-1, I'd expect that to be temporary as well. Hey, it could. I mean, if what is, I think, is possible. I mean, I'm not all knowing. I mean, I don't know. All I'm doing is projecting and sharing my opinion with people. But if I'm right, and there is nowhere near the amount of silver that is physical silver available, as is underwritten by the cartel, if you will, of bullion banks on the COMEX, then all of a sudden there's going to be an awakening one day that people go, whoa, wait a second, hold on. We thought there were, X billion ounces available on the face of the planet. You mean that there's actually only a fraction of that? That realization may temporarily drive that ratio under 10-to-1. But again, I think the next question then would be, well, wait a second, if there's that little silver, there's probably that little gold too, and then the ratio expands back out. So
yeah, it's logical. It makes sense. The next question we have is Giuseppe.
Hello, Mr. Ferguson. How are you?
Giuseppe, nice to visit with you.
Thank you for being on. My question is going to be about paper-denominated assets. I'll ask you this first one here. Value of paper-denominated assets have become very easily manipulated, some to grotesque proportions as opposed to their underlying physical. Since paper can be swayed one way or another depending on the amount played, much like a poker game, do you see an unhinging event happening in the future of paper, gold, and silver markets, breaking away from the physical metal? And how do you see this playing out?
That is really one of the biggest open questions right now about people that I guess like myself or anybody that follows the markets, the precious metals markets, is if the paper, the derivative market implodes, what does that imply for the physical price? Is the physical price driving the paper prices? And frankly, it's all conjecture. It would be, since it would be an original event, we don't have a lot of history, and that's why people are giving it so much thought. If all of a sudden the COMEX can't deliver, well, all right, then what value is a COMEX contract? That's ultimately the question. You have, let's say I own a COMEX contract that says someone's going to pay me or deliver to me 5,000 ounces of silver on a certain date. But if all of a sudden the COMEX defaults because they don't have the silver, well, who owes me that silver? The seller of the contract does, I guess. But how do we figure out who that is? And again, so that is really the challenge of paper versus physical. And I've yet to read anything. I've yet to have an original thought that made any sense in that regard. And I've yet to read anything that I went, yeah, okay, that makes sense, because nobody knows. You can make a case for a number of different things, but again, since it would be a first-time event, no one can say for sure what it would be. I advise people. Gosh, I get emails about this all the time. At the risk of giving you a rambling answer, I'm going to kind of veer off here for a second. Why do I trade why am I trying to make fiat money through all my trading if I'm concerned about the end of the great Keynesian experiment and preparing for what that might hold? I'm trying to make as much fiat as I can so that ultimately I can convert that fiat into physical in order to protect the fiat wealth that I have accumulated, so that one day, ultimately, when this all shakes out, and again, it could be a year from now, 10 years from now, but one day, ultimately, when this all shakes out, I'm able then to convert my physical back into the whatever currency the U.S., the region, the world chooses to use for commerce. So I tell people, I was very excited this afternoon. I finally emptied my inbox at TF Metals report. So I kind of stood up and did a little jig. I was so glad to see it with a zero next to it or empty. Because I get so many emails and people ask me all the time, well, how much gold should I own versus silver? What percentage? I can't tell people. I mean, not in the business anymore of giving investment advice. But what I do tell people is, you buy gold, physical gold that you hold in your hands to protect your wealth. Because you're not going to, you might have a gold coin that today is worth $1,500 that a couple of years from now could be worth $5,000. Well, what are you going to do? I guess you could take a couple of those and buy a car with it. If we're in that dire of straits where we're exchanging gold coins for stuff. But I doubt it. I doubt that it. But again, that's hard for me to picture that type of living in that kind of time. So you own gold to protect your wealth. Again, the gold is denominated in dollars. The more dollars they produce, the value of the dollar goes down, and so gold goes higher, and eventually the dollar gets converted into some new global special drawing right or some type of currency. Your gold has moved inversely to the dollar, and so all of your wealth that you've been able to accumulate has been stored in that gold, and then you convert it back into this new measure of commerce, and life continues on. Silver, physical silver you own, just because of that ratio, because it's always going to be less value, less pricey than gold. And that physical silver, should there come a time when we're unable to transact things electronically or through, paper dollars or paper pounds or euro, the physical silver maybe you can use for a short period of time to buy food, to buy fuel, to buy whatever. So you own gold to protect